Okay, I am going to show you how to create a pivot table. So, a pivot table is the thing that turns a spreadsheet into an analysis tool. A pivot table is what allows you to ask questions of your data. So, this is the data that you all have. First of all, I want to select all of the data. The best way to do that is to click and hold on the first column and then just drag across. And then let go when I get to the last column. So now I've selected all my data. This is the data that I want to use to inform my pivot table. All right, to get a pivot table, you go to Insert and Pivot Table. And now it asks me, do I want to put it on this sheet or do I want to put it on a new sheet? New sheet is usually the best because you just get lots of clutter otherwise. So it's just easier to see and to manipulate. So I'm going to do new sheet. Okay, so this is a pivot table. Pivot table has rows, columns, and values. Values is where the math happens, and rows and columns are intersections of your data. So let's just start this by asking a question. So on what day of the week, on each day of the week, what buttons are clicked? So I want to know the total number of clicks for each color for each day. So I'm going to put the days in the rows and the colors in the columns. I could do it the other way around, but that's just what I'm going to pick right now. So in the rows, I'm going to put weekday. And in the columns, I'm going to put color. So now you see I've got green, red, yellow. I've got Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Tuesday, Wednesday. The sort is happening alphabetically. We can clean that up later, but it's fine for now. And so in the values, I want counts of all of these things. So what I want to do is count each row that fits in each of these categories. The best way to do a count with values is to find a unique field. So timestamp in this case is never repeated. The timestamp is always different on every row. So I'm going to use my timestamp, and then automatically it will understand it as a count. And so now I can come in here and I can see there's a total of 5,266 lines of data. We know this, so now that justifies that. We know that on Thursday, we get the most clicks, which is interesting, right? So the most clicks happen on Thursdays. And if we just sort of come in here and scan the data, what we can see strangely is that there are the most clicks for red on Thursdays. So that's a strange data point. That's not what I would expect. That's counterintuitive. But let's go ahead and let's add button mashing. Okay. So there's a couple different ways we could do that. We could just filter out all button mashing, but I think it would also be interesting to be able to compare data that is button mashing versus data that's not button mashing. Okay, so to do that, I can add button mashing to the rows or to the columns. So much of doing this is trying things and seeing if it's easy to read as a chart. If it isn't, making changes. So applying your brain to whether or not these things are easy to read. So for instance, actually relative to that, I usually like to change the alignment to be centered on all of these because I think it makes it easier to read. So that's a thing you can do, certainly not required. Okay, so I'm going to add button mashing to the row here. So I'm going to click Add, and I'm going to do button mashing. And so you see what this does is it starts with the date and then breaks it out by button mashing. I could do this the other way around. I could move button mashing above, and that will do button mash. That'll start with button mashing and then show the dates. I think because I want to compare these, I'm going to do it this way for now. I need to go in and redo my centering because that got all screwed up. Okay. So now I can remember it was Thursday, red. Well, so this is interesting. So Thursday in general has 171 red clicks, which is still a lot for red clicks on any one day. But what's really interesting is there's 750. So this could possibly be just one person being very cookie clicker and just sitting there on some Thursday hitting that button a lot of times, right? And so I would say in this case, it probably makes sense to filter out button mashing because this is such an outlier piece of data, right? So I'm going to take button mashing away here and then come down to filters, click add and button mashing. And then what I can do is filter out. So I only want false, which means I only want data that is not button mashing. So I'm going to filter out the true and I'm going to click OK. So now I've got a data set that feels like it makes a little more sense, right? And so that big number of button mashing on Thursdays, and maybe just one Thursday, has now been changed. And now when I look at the data here, this makes a little more sense, though it is interesting that Fridays and Mondays get very few button presses relative to the other 3 days. But anyway, here's a data set that makes more sense. It's logical. Okay. So let's do this one more time with a different question. So let's say, let's do time of day. Okay. So I am going to do yet another pivot table. It's already selected. I'm going to do insert right by it, pivot table. And I'm once again going to do new sheet. And in the row this time, I'm going to put timestamp. So this is actually not particularly helpful, right? Because it's not summarizing anything. But if I right click on timestamp and then do